Welcome to VNT. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. In October 2025, the Dutch government stunned the world by seizing control of Nexperia, a key semiconductor firm owned by China's Wingtech. The decision came after months of mounting tension over foreign influence in Europe's most advanced industries. Nexperia, with its deep roots in Dutch innovation, had become a symbol of national pride and technological prowess. The government's intervention was not just a legal maneuver. It was a dramatic assertion of sovereignty over a company seen as vital to the nation's future. This bold move sent shockwaves through global financial markets, wiping billions off the value of tech stocks overnight. Investors scrambled to assess the risks, while analysts debated whether this marked the beginning of a new era of Western resistance to Chinese ownership in critical technology sectors. The world's attention turned to the Netherlands, now at the center of a high-stakes geopolitical chess match. Nexperia, a descendant of the legendary Dutch electronics giant Philips, dominates the market for essential chips, tiny components that power everything from smartphones and cars to medical devices and industrial machinery. Its factories and research labs are the beating heart of Europe's semiconductor ecosystem, making the company indispensable to both local and global supply chains. The Dutch action was more than a business dispute. It was a powerful geopolitical statement about who controls the backbone of modern technology. As politicians debated the implications, world leaders gathered at emergency summits, and tech executives braced for ripple effects that could reshape the industry for years to come. Beijing condemned the seizure as outright economic piracy, accusing the Netherlands of violating international norms and vowing severe consequences. The move ignited fears of a broader confrontation, as Chinese officials warned of retaliatory measures and nationalist protests erupted outside embassies across Europe. The world watched anxiously as a single corporate takeover spiraled into a full-blown crisis, threatening the stability of global supply chains. With electronic shortages looming and diplomatic tensions rising, the fate of Nexperia became a symbol of the fragile balance between national security and economic globalization. The Dutch government's move was the result of years of growing anxiety over Chinese influence in critical technology. Western intelligence warned that China's military-civil fusion policy could turn Nexperia's expertise into a strategic asset for Beijing. With ASML and the Brainport Eindhoven tech hub nearby, the risk of sensitive knowledge leaking to China was too great for Dutch leaders to ignore. The Netherlands, pressured by allies and shifting European attitudes, decided national security outweighed economic ties. New investment screening laws gave the government power to act, retroactively blocking Wingtech's ownership on security grounds. The message was clear. Europe's era of open-door policy for Chinese tech investment was over. China's retaliation was swift and precise, sending shockwaves through the global economy almost overnight. The world watched as Beijing's leadership moved decisively, signaling that this was not just a diplomatic spat, but a calculated economic maneuver with far-reaching consequences. Beijing restricted exports of the very chips Nexperia's Chinese factories supplied to Europe's carmakers. These semiconductors, small but essential, were suddenly out of reach for European manufacturers, leaving supply chains in disarray and executives scrambling for alternatives. Within days, assembly lines across Germany, France, and Italy ground to a halt, exposing Europe's deep reliance on Chinese-controlled supply chains. The hum of production was replaced by silence as thousands of workers found themselves with nothing to do but wait. The modern car, packed with semiconductors, became the symbol of Europe's vulnerability. Every dashboard, every safety system, every electric motor depended on chips that were now locked behind geopolitical barriers. The crisis dwarfed previous chip shortages, as unfinished vehicles piled up and factories stood idle. Parking lots overflowed with cars, missing just a handful of components, while delivery deadlines slipped further into uncertainty. Industry leaders and unions blamed the Dutch government for acting without a backup plan, putting millions of jobs at risk. Workers feared for their livelihoods, and the sense of frustration grew with each passing day. China's targeted response turned a Dutch-Chinese dispute into a continent-wide emergency. What began as a single policy decision now threatened the stability of Europe's entire automotive sector. Political pressure mounted on European leaders to resolve the standoff before the damage became irreversible. Debates raged in parliaments and boardrooms, as leaders searched for a way out of the crisis. The lesson was stark. Europe's industrial might was hostage to a single point of failure. The fate of millions now rested on the smallest of components, and the urgent need for supply chain resilience had never been clearer. As governments clashed, Nexperia itself fractured along national lines. Dutch management, now under state control, accused Wingtech of siphoning intellectual property and prioritizing Chinese interests. Wingtech fired back, calling the Dutch team xenophobic and blaming them for the crisis. The public feud paralyzed the company, halting private negotiations and deepening mistrust. Employees worldwide were caught in the crossfire, as suspicion and resentment replaced collaboration. Nexperia's internal war became a microcosm of the larger techno-nationalist conflict. The company's fate now rested with diplomats, not engineers. The breakthrough came at the COP30 climate summit in Brazil, where Dutch, German, and EU leaders met Chinese officials behind closed doors. Germany's involvement was crucial, as its auto industry bore the brunt of China's export ban. The talks, shielded by the summit's environmental agenda, allowed both sides to seek a face-saving compromise. On November 8th, a deal was struck. China would resume chip exports, ending the automotive paralysis. European leaders hailed the agreement as a diplomatic victory. But the details told a more complicated story. The crisis had forced Europe to act as one, but the concessions made to China would soon become clear. The resolution restored supply chains, but not without a price. China's resumption of chip exports came with strict conditions. European firms had to guarantee civilian-only use, subject to Chinese verification. This gave Beijing leverage over European supply chains, while appearing to act responsibly on the world stage. Automakers like Aumovio quickly complied, eager to restart production despite the new oversight. Relief swept through the industry, but the cost was a loss of economic sovereignty. ASML's CEO subtly criticized the Dutch government's approach, arguing that dialogue, not confrontation, was the better path. The crisis institutionalized Europe's dependency on China rather than solving it. Companies got their chips, but at the expense of strategic autonomy. The precedent was set. China could and would use its supply chain power for political ends. In the end, China emerged as the clear winner, not just in the negotiations, but in the broader contest for influence and control. The world watched as Beijing's strategy unfolded with precision, leaving little doubt about who held the upper hand. China dictated the terms of the resolution, setting the pace and exposing Europe's strategic vulnerabilities for all to see. The balance of power had shifted, and Europe found itself reacting rather than leading. The Dutch government, isolated and under immense international pressure, was forced into a deal that overwhelmingly favored Beijing's interests. The sense of defeat was palpable, as Dutch officials faced tough questions at home and abroad. Europe's deep dependence on Chinese components was revealed as a critical weakness, one that had been underestimated for years. The supply chains that powered Europe's industries were now seen as fragile and exposed. This was not just an economic reality, but a strategic liability that threatened Europe's autonomy and future prosperity. The Nexperia crisis shattered the illusion of a purely economic partnership with China. It became clear that business and politics were deeply intertwined, and that economic ties could be used as leverage in times of conflict. The lesson for Europe was stark. Supply chain security is national security. The ability to control critical technologies and resources is now recognized as essential for sovereignty and resilience. In the face of growing geopolitical threats, unity among European nations is more important than ever. Only by working together can Europe hope to protect its interests and values. China's long game paid off, as years of investment and planning culminated in a decisive advantage. The world saw how economic power could be transformed into political leverage. By leveraging its economic strength, China secured political gains that will shape the global landscape for years to come. Europe now faces a costly reckoning, reshoring production, investing in new technologies, and fundamentally rethinking its relationship with China. The path forward will demand difficult choices and significant investment. The immediate crisis may be over, but the consequences will echo for years. European leaders are left to grapple with the reality of a changed world order. The era of strategic dependency has only just begun, and Europe must now decide how it will respond to the challenges ahead.